Hi, everybody. Hi, Pearlene. So
Hi.
today we are going to speak about burnout, and it's a topic that looks like people really resonate with. Actually, I think this is one of the talks we've had the most signups for. So that just means to us, seems like a lot of you are dealing with burnout. It's a very relevant topic right now. I've read some articles about people working 1 to 1.5 hours longer on average, given that a lot of people are working from home. And just COVID, I guess, adds to the layer of all other anxiety and stress that we are experiencing collectively. So I'm really excited for today because we're joined by Dr. Pearlene Ng. Pearlene is a senior clinical psychologist and team lead for Viriya Psychological Services. And yeah, so today she'll be talking to us about burnout. So, Pearlene, maybe just to start off and to introduce yourself, how long have you been in the mental health space and what kind of clientele do you work with?
Yeah, hi, Alyssa, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I've been in the mental health space as a psychologist for about 8 years. And the main clientele groups that I see are kind of children, adults with mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and PTSD.
All right, thanks for that. Just to let everyone know, we'll be doing a chat first between the two of us, and at the end, we'll have 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So save your questions for then. There's a Q&A box. You can drop them there, and I'll choose some questions as we go along. So, Perlene, going back to
Mm.
our topic of the day,
Mm-hmm.
as a psychologist, you're always focused on helping other people and caring for their well-being. And I can imagine holding space for so many people can take its toll too.
Mm.
So, have you ever experienced burnout, and what was it like?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think luckily enough, I've not experienced to the full extent of a burnout, but definitely have felt stress many times. And I think some days are just a bit harder than other days. So some days when it's a bit fuller, when we have back-to-back sessions and meetings, then it's inevitable to feel stressed. That's like how everyone would feel stressed, and I think luckily for myself, I'm able to kind of catch myself and be aware of the signs and symptoms. So I feel that kind of help to kind of mitigate the risk of getting burnout. Um, yeah, but when I'm stressed, just like anybody, I notice myself getting anxious, getting worried thoughts. My sleep, my appetite may be affected. And yeah, sometimes kind of just being quite worried about the outcome of a project, or even quite worried about my clients, like how are they doing and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. What about yourself?
Definitely have experienced burnout myself, and I've actually quit a job before because of burnout, and to an extent where I felt that stress was affecting my physical health as well. I
Mm.
don't know. I feel like it's quite common, but I've had stress, affect the digestive system, and I've gotten kind of like an acidic stomach, and I realized actually that those symptoms went away as soon as I quit that job. So it's very, very related. So, um, yeah, and I think it's pretty common here in Singapore as well as the rest of Asia. We work hard, we work long hours. It's just part of the culture, and the expectations are, you work as hard as you can, really, around here. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm actually curious when now over the past year, with COVID
Mhm.
and everything, what has it been like as a mental health professional? And do you see an uptick of people actually experiencing burnout?
Yeah, definitely. I think um, there's an increase in people stepping forward to seek professional help since COVID first started. And I think that's also because there's a lot more kind of focus on mental health and a lot more kind of talks online that make it more accessible. We have the National Care Hotline that make it really accessible for people to seek help. So we do see an uptick in people coming forward to seek help, but also we do see an uptick in people coming forward to seek help for work-related stress. So work-related anxiety, work-related stress, and burnout definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And how would you define burnout, and how is it different from just normal stress?
Yeah. So I think the definition of burnout, if we kind of look at the official definition by the WHO, which they listed in the ICD-11, is that burnout is actually really a syndrome conceptualized, as resulting from chronic work stress or workplace stress, and that's the element of the workplace stress not being successfully managed. So stress and burnout is actually on the same continuum. It's on a spectrum, right? So you feel stress, and stress is a very normal kind of reaction. It's a physiological reaction to a stressor, right? And then burnout is really kind of prolonged stress or chronic stress. And stress is relatively short term. Stress can be both positive and negative. So positive stress, that's what we call eustress, that motivates us to do things, right? And stress often is quite short term, related to a specific event. Once the event is over, we are kind of sort of all right. And stress causes us to over engage in activities. So when you feel stress in your job, you do more things. Well, burnout, on the other hand, is on the other end of the spectrum. So with stress, with chronic stress, and then leading to burnout, burnout can be long term, and then instead of over engaging in your work, burnout causes you to disengage, because it causes you to feel unmotivated. It causes you to feel a sense of cynicism in your work. So as a result, you feel hopeless, you disengage. So it can be quite different. And also, according to the definition, burnout is kind of work related, and it's often caused by environmental factors or systemic factors in your environment. So those would be the key differences between burnout and stress.
Right. So essentially, burnout is not like a medical condition, and it's not something you can get diagnosed for, but it's kind of a symptom of all these stressors that you can experience in life. You mentioned it's typically related to work, and I think that's how people usually associate burnout. But are there other kinds of burnout, and what are there? Is there anything that we maybe don't typically consider as burnout?
Yeah, for sure. I think when we talk about burnout, even in the official definition, we say it's work related. So that often kind of involve kind of paid jobs. But I think what we're forgetting is that there's a lot of people in unpaid jobs. That's their full-time job, like caregivers, parents. So they also experience burnout, like caregiver burnout, parenting burnout. And in the past year, there's recent talks about pandemic burnout. So how does a pandemic, prolonged stress actually cause us to feel symptoms of burnout as well?
Right. So we actually have a poll today because we also want to know, everybody in the audience, what kind of burnout have you experienced? So in a little bit, you should see a poll pop up. We'll just ask you, what kind of burnout have you experienced? And you can choose more than one option. So maybe it's work, maybe it's something I've read. Chronic illness is another thing. You deal with something that's always there. It's hard to escape from. It can also create stress. And if you click other, I'd love to hear from you as well in terms of what that is like. Yeah, and I'm seeing already some questions coming in, so we'll definitely answer those later on. Yeah, so just a few more minutes will allow you to take a few more minutes to answer the poll, and we'll address that. Ooh, I see some people, yeah, pandemic burnout, definitely. And I don't know if there's anybody in the Philippines here. I know that you all are still in lockdown, and prolonged lockdown can definitely affect, how stressed we are and how burnt out you feel from the pandemic.
Yeah, I see virtual meeting burnout, like Zoom burnout.
Oh, that's another one. Sorry
Yeah.
to add to your Zoom meetings, guys. Yeah. All right. So, Sab, if we can show the results of the poll, I'd love to see it. Oh, I definitely see a few people. Okay, work is 87%, but I'm seeing things like relationships, being a caregiver, and school. If you've chosen other, I'd love to hear in the comments what exactly you've been dealing with. I'm seeing, we said pandemic burnout, Zoom burnout. Let us know what else you've been experiencing. So I guess because it looks like there's, besides work, we'll definitely focus on work, but maybe we can cover a few of the other causes as well. All right. So that brings me, I guess, to the next question, which is, what are really the causes of burnout? And I believe there are, like you said, environmental factors, but also internal factors. What would be the internal factors that maybe a person is causing their own burnout because of their own behaviors?
Yeah, sure. So I think just to kind of talk a bit more about burnout before we kind of look at the factors that causes it, there's essentially 3 characteristics of burnout. So just because we feel stressed doesn't mean we might reach burnout, right? So the 3 characteristics of burnout is that first, there must be feelings of energy depletion or feelings of exhaustion, right? And then second, there must be an increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. And third, as a result, it reduces work proficiency or efficacy, right? Or reduces work performance. So kind of looking at, what causes burnout, I think like what we mentioned that burnout is essentially related to work. It's a problem related or associated with employment. So definitely the environment at the workplace causes burnout. And what we know from research is that burnout is related to stresses in the environment rather than related to weakness within an individual. So when somebody experiences burnout, it's actually really it's more of a measure of the health of the organization or the environment than the health of an individual, right? But of course,
it's really interesting.
Yeah, but of course, the individual are experiencing symptoms and presentations of burnout, right? So we say that that's why the main cause of burnout is really the environmental factors, the systemic factors, but there are certain internal factors that increases our risk of getting burnout, such as different personality types. So if we are perfectionists, or we're high achievers, or if we are reluctant to delegate jobs or work, then that might increase our kind of risk to getting burnout. And also some lifestyle factors that we have might also increase our risk to getting burnout, such as we're working too hard, we have poor kind of work-life balance, we don't have that many close supportive relationships or friends or colleagues at work, and if we're taking on too many responsibilities without getting help, and definitely not getting enough sleep. So sleep is really, really important to mitigate the risk of getting burnout. So those are internal factors that makes us more prone to burnout. But as research has shown, burnout is repeatedly caused by excessive and prolonged stress in the environment. So a recent study by Gallup, that kind of looked at, they surveyed employees in a workplace, and what they found is that the top 5 causes of burnout in full-time employee are firstly unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload, lack of role clarity, lack of communication and support from their manager, and unreasonable time pressure. And what this tells us is actually the top 5 causes of burnout are all external factors rather than internal factors or internal weaknesses in an individual.
Right. So, I mean, if your environment is really unhealthy and contributes to burnout, to what extent can the individual prevent burnout from occurring? Or are there, would you say, certain environments where there's just nothing you can do and you need to get out of there?
I think it's not a either or all or nothing measure. I think at the end of the day, the individual can do things to mitigate the risk of getting a burnout, especially when we see how certain personality types or certain lifestyles are actually more prone to burnout. And I think burnout can happen to anyone, and burnout doesn't happen overnight, right? It's a gradual increase from stress to burnout, and we know that stress and burnout is on a continuum. So an individual actually does have the power or the ability to kind of stop burnout early, right? So we always talk about early intervention, early promotion. And often what I like to kind of tell my clients are the 3 R's in kind of preventing burnout. So the 3 R's are recognize, reverse, and rejuvenate. Right? So the first thing we want to do is recognize that we're on the path to burnout, because it's on a continuum. So it goes from stress all the way to burnout. So once we recognize that we're on that path and we recognize our early warning signs, then we can start taking actions to reverse the impact of burnout or impact of the environmental stresses on us. So the second R is reverse. And how we reverse it is really kind of to manage the stress and seek support, right? So some things that we can do is really kind of having clearer work boundaries, scheduling self-care activities, and because a lot of the kind of causes of burnout is in the system, is in the environmental factors, the individual is in the system, the individual is part of the system. So the individual can actually collaboratively work with leaders in their organization to make systemic changes to the culture or to adopt relevant and appropriate workplace accommodations, right? And also, how we talked about how some personalities and lifestyle are more prone to burnout. So the individual can actually reverse the path to burnout by working on those, right? So really kind of letting go a bit more, reduce expectation on themselves, being kind to themselves, right? Changing their lifestyle. And lastly, the third R would be rejuvenate. So I think what we have to kind of acknowledge is that our lives and our career is a marathon, is not a sprint, right? And there's a quote about about wellness that says, when you are healthy, you have 1,000 wishes, but when you're unwell, you only have one wish, right? And that's to get healthy, right? So what we want to do is we need to rejuvenate ourselves, and our energy is really like a battery. We need to charge, we need to recharge so that we can get better, so that we can kind of continue doing what we do. So kind of taking pauses in our days to kind of recharge, to rejuvenate ourselves. It could be a mini charge, like kind of maybe going out for lunch with your colleagues, taking a pause in the middle of the day, maybe doing some brief mindfulness exercises, right? Or at night, taking a longer charge. So like sleeping well, and kind of doing activities that rejuvenate both our minds and souls. So hanging out with people you love and care about, having that connection, that social connection, exercising, kind of exploring our interests, spending time on our interests, and also asking ourselves what's our priority in life and what's our aspiration, what's your passion, because having a passion actually reduces the risk of burnout, right? So if we're doing something, we're spending a lot of time doing something we don't like, that's called stress. But if we're spending a lot of time doing something we like, that's called passion. So it's really a fine line between stress and passion, and it's really kind of finding out what do you live for, what's your passion, and what do you not mind doing.
Thanks for that. I'll definitely want to explore a little bit more in detail later on some more strategies for, coping with burnout and building resilience against it. Just something I wanted to actually ask everyone. I noticed, right, work was the top cause for burnout for all of you in the audience. I'm curious to know maybe what industries you work in. So if you could just pop in the chat what industries you work in. You can write it to us panelists so that if you want to be anonymous. Pearlene, is there in your own line of work, are there certain people or industries or jobs, who's at most at risk for burnout?
I think amongst my clients, and I guess based on research, I think those who are more at risk at burnout are frontliners. So doctors, nurses, because they work in really high stress situations. Mm-hmm. Lawyers as well. So there's a high rate of burnout amongst lawyers. I think someone wrote banking, finance. Those industry have the environment or conditions to increase your risk of having burnout. And I think also because certain personality are attracted more to certain careers. So they tend to be high achievers,
right.
Perfectionists. Yeah, hence that's why I guess there's a higher risk of burnout
Right.
amongst these populations.
Okay. I'm actually seeing a really diverse, I mean, I see healthcare here. I see finance, tech, a lot of tech, IT, data analytics, digital marketing, accounting. It's pretty diverse. Another industry, I think, or perhaps not industry, but type, I would say might be susceptible to burnout is probably entrepreneurship, given that, you know, usually you don't have breaks built in, especially if you're running something. You said something about if you're doing something that you love, that is your passion. Um, it's passion, and not, you can't get burnt out. But I don't know. I've seen definitely entrepreneurs who have pursued their passion, but because they're unable to take the breaks that they need,
Mm.
it can really be taxing on your mental health.
Definitely, and also I think that sometimes when we work on our passion too much, it no longer becomes a passion, but it becomes a job or a chore, and I think that's when then burnout seeps in.
Yeah, I see somebody said my burnout has caused me to dislike what I love. I mean, and once you do that, right? Like, where do you go? What? That was your passion. So what are you going to do now to get rid of your burnout if it's what's causing your burnout?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I guess kind of going back to the 3 R's, kind of wanting to kind of recognize that we're on the path towards burnout, and then kind of reverse by doing some of some activities or self-care activities, lowering our expectations, and then kind of making changes in our work. Even though we're entrepreneurs, are there things that we can change, and then kind of then rejuvenate both our mind and soul, and see, reevaluate. I guess reevaluate, is that
Yeah.
still your passion, or is there something else?
Yeah. Can I go back to that first step on
Mm.
recognize?
Mm.
A lot of people I've heard don't realize they're burning out until they're really, they just can't work anymore. They literally physically can't do it. What should you be looking out so that you recognize you're on the path to burning out?
Mm. So there are three kind of areas that we kind of typically kind of look out for: physical, emotional, and behavioral. So physically, some signs of burnout is that if you're constantly feeling tired, depleted of energy, constantly feeling exhausted, if you notice changes in your appetite or sleep, and kind of having a general kind of sense of dread when you think about your work, and feeling that sense of dread, right? And then emotional, when you start kind of noticing, having that mental distance from your job, general feelings of negativity or cynicism about your job, feeling quite hopeless or having self-doubts. And then behavioral, signs of burnout would be if you kind of start withdrawing from your work responsibilities, there's an increase in work absenteeism, so kind of taking MC or kind of not wanting to go to work. And then if you notice there's a reduced kind of performance or efficiency in your work, those would be some behavioral signs. And actually, in the most severe cases of burnout, what we know is that it can overlap with symptoms of clinical depression, and it can lead to clinical depression, which would cause loss of interest, loss of appetite, loss of sleep, feeling down, crying, having thoughts of suicide and stuff like that.
Right. And I guess these are tips that employers can also use, right, to see if their employees are burning out. What's a good way for a manager to approach their staff if they suspect burnout? Like, what's a good way to ask them?
I think, you know, it's really kind of having that culture of talking about mental health, and kind of having that psychological safety with your staff, because I think with stigma around mental health, sometimes if a manager goes to a staff and asks, hey, seems like you're experiencing burnout, are you doing anything, they might be quite afraid if there's no psychological
Yeah.
safety, right, to kind
And
of
they'll
say
just
like,
lie. I'm fine. Don't fire me.
yeah, exactly. So that's what we kind of talk about. Actually, systemic changes in the environment is the most helpful, right? Because you want to be able to build that psychological safety with your employee to have such conversations. Otherwise, you're gonna get a superficial response, and nothing's gonna change. Yeah, but I
Right.
guess the first thing really is to kind of adopt that empathetic leadership style, kind of acknowledging that your staff is getting burnout, and they're getting burnout not because of the individual weakness, but because there are issues in the environment, right, that's causing them that. And acknowledging that, maybe even having that humility to kind of say that, hey, yeah, it's not perfect, like, and the work environment is not perfect, we need to make changes. And then, having, listening quite actively and then taking action. So having the ability to then take action to kind of change whatever that's causing burnout in your staff.
Right. How about just flipping the question a little bit? If I was burning out, what's a good way to tell my boss without, again, that risk of like, oh no, that person's underperforming, or what's a good way for me to be, hey, this environment is bad, it needs to change. And especially if, say, you're a direct manager or perhaps above is not receptive to mental health.
I mean, this reminds me of a client that actually I saw last year. So she kind of referred herself to services because she felt really burnt out, and she felt that sense of hopelessness every morning, that dread of going to work, and she didn't know what to do. So kind of after exploring, she was like, yeah, it's because the workload has increased. She's not able to cope at work. And she's afraid that her boss would not be understanding, and she's afraid that if she goes to him, she'll be judged. So she felt really stuck and really helpless. But I think after exploring, she was like, okay, I'm going to take that risk and I'm going to tell him, because if I don't tell him, I'm going to be stuck here. But if I take that risk and tell him, there's two outcomes, right? One, he's receptive and he makes changes. Two, he's not receptive, he doesn't make changes. And then I realized that perhaps this is not the workplace that I want to work for, and then I leave. So that kind of made her feel like, okay, I can take that risk. I'm going to tell him, and so she did. And to a surprise, her boss was really, really understanding, and he was like, okay, I'm going to give you time off. We're going to relook at your workload, and then we'll kind of slowly get you back on track. So I guess we really wouldn't know whether our bosses or how people react until we try.
Right.
Yeah.
I see one question, actually. Someone says, how do you establish psychological safety? So, I mean, before that person even, you said they had to take a risk there,
Yes.
How is my boss going to react? How can you proactively say, yeah, I want to establish this culture of psychological safety so that people aren't afraid of asking these questions?
So I think the idea of psychological safety is that there is safety in the organization, right? As a culture, people don't feel blamed or people don't feel judged, and a lot of this has to come from really top down kind of initiatives and approaches from management. Right? So as an individual, we can encourage people to kind of talk about mental health. We can encourage them to kind of for our managers to talk about it. But if our managers are not receptive, then there's only so much that we can do. So the whole idea of psychological safety is that it has to be top down. Everybody has to be involved. The whole system has to change, and there's a culture. But of course, as an individual, what we can do is that we can feedback to our organization, feedback to our manager, and do whatever is within our ability to kind of cause that shift. But our voice is really important, because I think sometimes leaders or managers may not be aware of what's happening on the ground, or they may not be aware of how we're feeling until we kind of talk about it and until we kind of voice out.
Right. I actually want to ask you then, what are some, aside from establishing that kind of psychological safety, what are some more sustainable kind of policies that workplaces can implement? So I've just looking at the news, if you've heard, like Goldman Sachs recently, they've been in the news for junior employees complaining about the inhumane working conditions. They're having to work 100-hour weeks, right? And I read like the solution that they found is, oh, we'll send them some snack boxes. I mean, that sounds like a Band-Aid solution for me, and there are other banks, maybe I read another one sending Peloton bikes, I've heard people sending their staff to a yoga retreat, but I feel like these short-term Band-Aid solutions, right? You may have one yoga class, burnout's not gonna get cured there. So what are some more longer term solutions that should be implemented, or even with your own clients, like what seems to have worked?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to kind of establishing, psychological safety and improving or reducing burnout in an organization, there are typically kind of three things that seems to work. So the first is really to improve employees' experience and environment. So I guess earlier, kind of when I talked about the Gallup survey, what they found is that the number one predictor of burnout is a high workload. And conversely, the number one predictor of lower burnout is having a more manageable workload. So organizations can actually kind of look at staff's workload to kind of see, if your staff is kind of experiencing burnout, then communicate with them, what's the priority now and what can be put on the back burner, what can they focus on, right? And kind of just having really clearer job roles, encourage teamwork, encourage flexible working hours, giving employees a choice or autonomy, giving them a sense of control, giving them a voice would really be helpful in kind of improving their environment and experience at work. And then the second thing would be kind of to educate and equip managers to prevent burnout. So the second most cited predictor to reduce burnout is actually having an empathetic manager. So what I want to do is kind of encourage empathetic leadership, and encourage them to kind of talk about mental health and educate managers about what mental health is, what mental wellness is, and equip them with the skills to support their employee through asking questions, appropriate questions, encouraging them to take care of themselves, and kind of encourage them to kind of be, I guess, be willing to kind of share about their struggles in the environment, and also kind of increasing empathy, so that they feel that this is not just a band-aid solution. This is not just you're not just patronizing me, but you truly believe in my wellness, and you truly believe in wanting to kind of make this a better workplace environment for all of us. And of course, the last thing is really to kind of make mental well-being or even well-being part of the organization culture and make it a priority. So some organizations have kind of implemented HR policies, to kind of encourage better well-being, or kind of encourage staff to kind of live a healthier, meaningful, productive work life, and allowing them to kind of take time off for their mental health, or allowing them to take leave for their mental health needs, just as how you might take MC for your physical health, and also providing staff mental health support through access to professional help, peer support, mental health resources such as regular talks, workshops, activities, and also training staff and managers on ways to kind of kind of intervene or support one another when they're experiencing burnout or mental health difficulties.
Yeah, so it sounds like the key thing here is it's not a one-off thing. You can't just do one thing and expect everyone to be okay. Or you can't just, I mean, even the time off, right? I've taken vacation before thinking, okay, I'm gonna feel so much better, but then I come back, my inbox is like 10 times what it was, and then I have to now do 10 times the work. So it just like doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think with vacation, that's an interesting one because many people feel like, hey, I only have like 14 days of leave or 18 days of leave. I'm going to accumulate everything and take a long holiday. But what research has shown us is that actually, the quantity is better. So the number of leave that you take is better than the one long leave.
Oh,
So it's
so I
better for
should
you
take
to,
every Friday off.
yeah, exactly. Like, so mini breaks are better in the long run than a long break.
Right. Okay. Um, okay, we've talked a lot about work and how to kind of make changes at work so that it becomes a better environment, but I'm conscious that there are people listening in who have not necessarily only experienced work burnout, but all sorts of other burnout. I've seen people saying their kids give them burnout. They are caregivers for someone who maybe have disabilities, and that's like a full-time job. You can't escape that. You can't change the system or environment, right? How do you,
Yeah.
how do you deal with burnout in that case when you cannot change the environment that you're in? Like I can't leave a loved one, behind if I'm like, I'm so tired by, and you're
Yeah,
the main caregiver.
yeah. I think in our work with caregivers, I think the number one thing that makes them prone to burnout is that, they don't allow themselves to take breaks. So they don't give themselves the permission to be like, oh, I just need that 1 hour for myself, or that 2 hours for myself today. Right? And in the long run, then that would kind of lead to burnout. So as a caregiver, you're absolutely right. It's very different. You can't change your environment. So it's really kind of the whole internal kind of coping strategies that might be helpful. So allowing yourself to take breaks, allowing yourself to kind of indulge in some self-care activities, and delegating, or seeing if are there anything that you can actually delegate to someone else to do, or can you seek help, to kind of ask for help. So I think a lot of caregivers, they may be hesitant to ask for help, because they feel like, I don't want to trouble someone else, or they might not be the best person to take care. And there's kind of a lot of caregivers guilt as well. Like, am I allowed to do this? Like, it should be my responsibility. And they take on a lot more than they can. So there's a whole kind of analogy about caregivers. If I guess the analogy is that, if you're in an airplane, right, and it suddenly goes out of oxygen, and you have the oxygen mask, who do you wear the mask for first? You wear it for yourself first, or the person you're taking care of, right?
Yeah.
And it's always kind of wearing it for yourself first, because if you can't take care of yourself, you won't be able to take care of the person you're taking care of, right?
Yeah, and I'm seeing one question here. Someone has said that they feel really burnt out because their kids taking their primary six exam. Um, am I a bad parent for feeling burnt out? I mean, what would you have to say to that?
No, I think you're a normal parent, you're a normal human being, for feeling burnout. I think it's PSLE is a stressful year for everyone, right? For your child, for yourself, for the teachers, and it's absolutely normal to feel stressed, to feel burnout. So kind of going back to taking a step back, relooking at your priority, allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to just take that break once in a while. And I think even your child would need a break as well. So are there ways that you can take breaks together with your child, right? Because he might have burnout as well if he's kind of working 24/7 or studying 24/7.
Yeah, I saw someone else ask, can kids have burnout?
Yeah, definitely.
Can
I
I?
guess I guess burnout is really on the continuum of stress. So just like how anybody can feel stress, if we feel stress for a long time, for a chronic period, then it can lead to chronic stress, and then it can lead to burnout.
Yeah. I'm just seeing some suggestions from the chat as well. If I'm seeing all these chats going to only all panelists, but if you guys want to share these suggestions to the audience as well, just make sure you're chatting to all panelists and attendees. So, for example, someone said, if you're a caregiver, seek help from relatives, or stagger your caregiving duties to rotate. That's great advice. Yeah, so thanks for that. Definitely, I think that seeking permission from yourself is so important if you are dealing with a caregiver. How about? And I saw a few people say that they're suffering from relationship burnout. Maybe could you share what does that even mean? How do you experience relationship burnout?
I guess kind of if you go back to kind of the definition of burnout, it's kind of having that feeling of kind of hopelessness, negativity, cynicism, feelings of energy depletion, feelings exhausted, and then having kind of reduced kind of a performance, or reduced efficacy or efficiency. So I guess relationship burnout, that's just it's not really very common, in the work that we do, but it can happen, if you feel that there's a change in your relationship, like you suddenly feel like, oh, it's depleting my energy, taking a lot out of me, and then you have that kind of feelings of negativism or cynicism, And I think, like all types of burnout, it's really important to then be aware first, recognize those signs, and then kind of, reverse it if it helps, your relationship, or if that's what you want. You can by kind of taking a time out, giving yourself permission to kind of take care of yourself in your relationship, and then kind of reevaluate or kind of rejuvenate your relationship together, either by kind of exploring kind of renewed interest. And of course, at the end of the day, it's also important, just like how, individual burnout from work, it's important to seek support if it gets out of hand. It's also important to kind of then seek maybe relational counseling or family marital counseling if you feel like you can't cope on your own.
Right. Someone's asked, and if you are experiencing relationship burnout, how do you communicate that to your partner or loved one, since there might be a chance for a misunderstanding?
Yeah, I think like all relationships, it's really important to have that trust and open communication, which is very similar to kind of having that communication with your manager, right? So, if you have that foundation to be honest and to be upfront with your partner, then that's ideal. But if not, I guess there's always that first step towards building that foundation of kind of openness and honesty. And I guess kind of sometimes maybe showing that you're vulnerable maybe helpful in kind of having your partner kind of understand exactly what you're going through. I think sometimes when we're in a relationship for too long, we also kind of expect that, hey, you should know, or you should know some signs, you should have known. But also a lot of times we have partners telling us, oh, how would I have known if they didn't tell me? I'm not a mind reader. I can't guess. All these kind of things, right? So at the end of the day, I think having that openness and honesty in your relationship, and having that open communication would be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So communication is, big thing there. I'm seeing so many more questions about work, actually, and I realize perhaps it's something that we need to address a little bit more fully. So I'll just choose one on virtual workspace burnout, as a lot of people are still working from home. What can people do in the home? I guess it's hard to separate, right? Work and life, especially if your computer is just there. My own computer, my own workspace, it's in my bedroom. How do I stop myself from working, and causing myself burnout?
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, and I think a lot of our clients have also shared that during the pandemic, they actually experienced more burnout or higher risk of burnout because they're working longer hours. And if you can and when you kind of ask them, what's the reason why you're working longer hours, and a lot of them say like, yeah, because you can't it's easy to kind of work, you wake up and then you go to your room and then you kind of just sit there for long hours. But kind of behind that, some other people have shared, or some other clients have shared, it's because they feel afraid of losing their job during such an economic downturn, and or they feel really grateful for having a job, right? So actually that kind of causes them to kind of work longer hours because they feel like they have to keep their job. So I guess it's kind of maybe firstly kind of understanding what's the reason why you're working longer hours, right? And can you kind of explore it a bit, or address your concern or your worries, and then of course making changes to your routine. So being quite mindful about the number of hours you have worked, and being quite mindful also in kind of scheduling some self-care activities, or scheduling breaks in between your work day, maybe ensuring that you are kind of walking away from your desk during lunchtime or during dinner time, and making that a routine, so that you have a pause in the day. And I think having pause in the day is really important for us to kind of just recollect ourselves, just step back from work and kind of just rejuvenate or re-energize ourselves a little bit. I think someone mentioned about having virtual burnout from all these online meetings and stuff like that. So another thing might be kind of asking, do because I think it's so easy now to just organize a meeting on Zoom, right, or Microsoft Teams, and be like, hey, let's meet and let's talk. So maybe another thing might be we want to ask ourselves is that is this meeting essential? Is it important? And
Can this be an email?
Yeah, exactly, right. Can this be a text, an email? And if this meeting is important, then can we limit the time, right, so that it doesn't get dragged on? And also, can we maybe allow flexibility in kind of attending meetings online? Can we turn off our videos, right? Can we turn off can we mute ourselves if not necessary?
Would turning off videos actually help with burnout?
I think it is not, it's not like a solution, but I think psychologically it might help, because people might then be like, oh yeah, I don't have to be on form all the time.
Right.
I could be there, but I don't have to kind of be appropriate. I don't have to respond. I could kind of listen in. So I think psychologically that might help.
Okay, I'm gonna take that tip to my boss. Okay, I get overall what I'm hearing from you is, it's also important for us to create our own boundaries and, define that for ourselves and be clear on that, and then respect those boundaries. And ultimately, that's a personal choice. Where do you draw those boundaries, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to segue a little bit to another question, which is kind of touches on the lack of acceptance, or barriers to acceptance on mental health. And someone said that they quit their job recently due to burnout despite getting a promotion, and their boss put it on them and said, I didn't know you were not tough enough. And they're struggling with internalizing that toxic thought. And how do they fight that thought that they were not enough? And how do you fight these kind of individuals who don't have that empathy and who don't understand what it is, like what mental health is, and think it's a matter of being tough?
Yeah, I think that's a question that we all ask ourselves. How do we destigmatize mental health? I think there's no easy solution, right? And it really begins with ourselves being open, kind of wanting to communicate about mental health, sharing our mental health issues. It doesn't have to be clinical depression or anxiety, but as long as we make it part of our conversation, like, hey, I'm tired today, I'm feeling stressed today, just normalizing conversations around mental health, that goes a long way, right? And I think, it takes time for attitudes to change, for beliefs to change. Kind of coming back to the point about how do we kind of prevent ourselves from internalizing these comments. I think firstly, maybe it's about kind of sort of maybe being kind to ourselves and asking ourselves, if a friend or family was in that position, receiving that kind of comments from their boss, what would you say to them? And then can you just say that to yourself, right? But also kind of being quite objective about it, and kind of looking at reasons why he said that, and not personalizing it, but really the reasons might be, because he might have some biases, he might have some stigma towards mental health, and it's not on you, right? And he's entitled to his opinion, but what else are you? Are you kind of based, it's yourself, it's your I guess, are you based on the opinion of one person, or the opinion of many, many people who loves you and who knows you, and what would they say, right? And kind of then tuning out that cynicism or that negative comment, and kind of looking inward and kind of understanding yourself, your strengths, your values, and also kind of asking yourself, what would my loved one who really, really knows me say about me?
Yeah, that's really important. I'm seeing a question about someone is asking, can you recover from burnout and come back stronger? And I guess another question from that would be like, how do you build resilience against burnout?
Yeah, I think, definitely. Lots of people have recovered from burnout. And in fact, they have become stronger coming out of it. Right. I think it's again about kind of recovery from kind of yes, it's really about recovery. So how do we go from surviving to thriving, right? And I guess, coming back to the 3 Rs, it's really kind of doing things that reverse the impact of burnout. like self-care, taking care of yourself, doing exercises, making sure that you're getting enough rest, you're eating well, you're connecting with your peers, or your loved ones, and then kind of really rejuvenizing yourself, looking at what gives you passion, what gives you energy, looking at your priorities in your life, and working towards those things, right? And then that would kind of move us from surviving to thriving to growing as well.
Right. Okay. Someone has asked here, how do we know if it's time to seek professional help?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess my response to that is that there is no correct time to seek professional help, right? And I think as long as you think that maybe perhaps you're not coping well, or you have kind of tried to kind of speak to your friends or family, but things are still not going well, then you can seek professional help, because sometimes it's really easier to kind of speak to somebody that doesn't know you, that can remain quite neutral, as speaking to a friend or family. So really, there's no right time to seek professional help, but definitely, if you are feeling signs of clinical depression, clinical anxiety, having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, then those are definitely, a reason to seek help or a time to seek help.
Right. But of course, it doesn't have to be at that level, right? That it gets so serious.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've seen some other people ask things like, could depression or anxiousness be signs of leading to a burnout? It can, right? I mean, like burnout can lead to bigger mental health issues. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think research has shown that there's a lot of overlap between chronic burnout and depression and anxiety. Right. So again, burnout is a response to environmental stresses, right? And that response can look like depression, it can look like anxiety, but it can also lead to depression and anxiety, just like how depression and anxiety are responses to stresses in the environment.
Okay. I see a really interesting question here. Do men and women experience burnout differently? For example, in the build up to burnout, in the symptoms, and in the path to healing?
Well, that's a good question. And I think not just men and women, I would say individuals experience it quite differently. So even between women or between men, they might experience stress or burnout quite differently, right? And I think the gender difference might be that sometimes men may be a lot less willing to actually talk about their mental health. Right?
That's so true.
Yeah, and they might be less willing to actually show weakness, or show that they're not coping well emotionally. So that might then lead to maybe more severe symptoms of burnout, because they don't catch it early enough. Whereas maybe women, and this is kind of like a generalization, but I think some women then, they are a bit more open about their mental health. They speak to their friends a bit more about how they're feeling, and all these can mitigate signs and symptoms of burnout.
Right. Okay, this is a question for you are a clinical psychologist, and someone's asked, is there a difference between a counselor or a psychologist, and who should you see if you are facing burnout? Like, who's the first port of call?
I think there's really no kind of who's the first I should go and see. I guess the main difference between counselors and psychologists, is that a counselor tend to work on or tend to kind of work on issues of interpersonal issues, so like relationships issues, marriage, divorce, etc. Whereas a psychologist tend to work more with mental health disorders, like clinical depression, anxiety, trauma, etc. And psychologists tend to kind of make use of assessment tools to kind of assess and diagnose, and then provide treatment for the same mental health disorder. But in general, psychologists, counselors, we're all mental health professionals, right? So I don't think it's about who should you see first. but really, I guess for a lot of people, it's about kind of who should I, or whether am I able to take that first step, right,
Yeah.
to seek professional help. And I think at the end of the day, if you feel like, hey, you need professional help and you don't know who to see, you could really go to anyone, or you could go to a psychologist. They could kind of do an assessment, and then they could recommend, what's the best form of therapy or treatment, or support, that whatever will be helpful for you given your circumstances, because we're all very different.
Yeah. How about, I mean, reaching out to your support network? How can friends actually help and support in if you know that someone is experiencing burnout?
Yeah, I think, I think friends actually play a very critical role, in supporting someone who's experiencing burnout, or in supporting someone to seek help. Right. So usually, like, based on research, most people tend to go to their friends first before they even kind of seek professional help, or before they go and see a doctor, for example. So I guess if you have a friend or a peer who might be experiencing burnout, I think it's really kind of establishing that safety to kind of, to allow that person, or establishing that safe space to allow that person to talk to you about it, without judgment, and really without kind of, giving advice, or comments that may not be helpful, and really kind of just showing that, hey, I'm here to listen to you, and I guess then asking that person, what can I do to help you, right? Because we all cope with stress or mental health issues very differently, and it's always so important to then understand what would help for that person, right? Is it just providing a listening ear? Is it kind of asking that person out to kind of do activities or exercises together? Or is it kind of going down to the first appointment with a psychologist together?
That's really
Mm.
helpful, actually. I mean, it can be scary, especially if you've never seen a mental health professional before and you don't know what to expect. Just having the friend be there to support. I see someone in the comments saying, my friends pushed me to quit my job and told me they will always support me in all ways, and my health is my priority. So she said that she couldn't have done it with her friends. So definitely, friends are important. And if you have any loved ones, going through burnout or any other mental health issue, know that you can be there for them. So that's really great advice. Um, I'm seeing a few more kind of work related things, and I'll just address this next question. Someone said that after quitting their job, they have a fear of never ever finding a job where, or sorry, I have a fear of not ever finding a job where there's career growth without the burnout level torture. Can growth and good environment coexist?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think that, um, having a positive work culture can actually allow somebody to grow, and can allow somebody to thrive, right, in spite of stress. So having that positive culture at work is so important, and having supportive managers, supportive, colleagues, that actually prioritizes your mental health, is so important, and we can certainly grow, and recover, and thrive, after coming out from burnout.
Yeah. So we've been talking for about an hour, so I will just one last question here. And I think this is a good question for you because you are in the mental health space. And the question is, what do you think about professionals such as counselors, social workers, and psychologists seeking help? Yeah. So if you are a psychologist and you're, how do you seek help?
Yeah, I think that's a good one, and I think, it's so important for people in the helping profession to kind of seek help, and I guess because we do carry the additional responsibility of kind of taking care of our clients' mental health, right? So if we don't take care of our own, then, we might not be in the right, headspace to do that. So it is so important for us to kind of seek help, or to kind of, take care of our mental health. And seeking help doesn't have to be just formal professional help. There could be very informal ways of seeking help. And I'm really blessed to have colleagues, who are really encouraging. So we have like a peer support group where we meet, once a month, and we kind of just share about, what's affecting us, the struggles, and really normalizing that whole conversation, that it's okay to kind of be vulnerable, and it's okay to not feel okay. So I think, yeah, that's kind of what we do to kind of support ourselves, and I
Right.
think, as helping professionals, then we are aware of early warning signs, right? So it's really
Right.
important to then catch those and take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Actually, I lied. That wasn't the last question. One more question, which is, someone asked, are there accessible channels of support in Singapore which are free, affordable, and confidential? Yeah, well, actually, what does Viriya Services do? Maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we do have services, and subsidized services. So we have a specialist team that at our Viriya Therapy Center that provide therapy for individuals and families who might need additional support. So we have grief counselors, we have psychologists, we have family therapists. Um, and we also kind of see individuals in the community who may not be really able to kind of afford to pay for special for services, and then that's where we might kind of do means testing to kind of see whether we can provide subsidized services. Viriya also offers employee assistance programs where we work with organizations to provide mental health resources or support to their individuals or employees. So we provide counseling, talks and workshops, mental wellness activities in organizations, to organizations. And we also have a series of talks, workshops, online support groups for caregivers, for parents, for individuals recovering from mental health. So we have quite a number of services, and the easiest way is kind of just drop us an email at support@viriya.org.sg, and then one of us can get in touch with you.
Yeah.
There's also,
Are you
yes,
guys only in Singapore?
sorry.
Is Viriya only in Singapore?
Yes, we're only in Singapore, and yeah, we yeah, I mean, we do have, we offer kind of online therapy like via Zoom, but it's we kind of tend to only see Singaporeans because of safety of visa, etc.
Right. Okay. We definitely get a lot of questions all the time about mental health resources and who's a good psychologist, who's a good psychiatrist. So there's a list that we put on the chat. Thank you, Pearl, for sending that link. So if you guys want to check that out, and actually we'd love to be in touch as well if anyone out there has different recommendations from different countries, because we know that there's a lot of people not just based in Singapore who are following us. So we'll be putting up a blog soon. We'll link all those resources up. And we're now at 9:34, so we'll wrap up very soon. But before we all go, just so you know, we do talks pretty regularly on Zoom, and we also do them on Clubhouse. We also do IG lives sometimes. So just make sure to follow us on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find us Calm Collective Asia, or if you sign up on our website, www.calmcollective.asia, you should be able to see a list of upcoming talks, and make sure that you get an email newsletter which goes out and lets you know about any of our upcoming talks. And if you just want to get in touch and tell us, what's your feedback for our sessions, what would you love to hear in the future? We have a survey after this that you can fill out, or you could just email us at hello@calmcollective.asia, or DM us. Honestly, there's so many ways to reach out to us. We really appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I hope that you took away a lot of learnings from that session. Thank you so much, Pearlene, for sharing your insights, sharing your solutions. I've learned a lot. I've also have a few pointers to maybe take to my own workplace to say, hey, maybe we should be doing these to have that culture that supports mental health more and can help people spot the signs of burnout much earlier. So thank you for that.
Thanks for
And thank
having
you for
me.
everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye. Someone's asking, we will have a recording on this. We have a recording of all of our sessions actually on our website, calmcollective.asia. There's premium access for all the replays, but we'll be snipping out some of the key pointers and and making shorter videos. So just tune in and kind of make sure you follow us on social media. We'll definitely be creating more content on burnout, and possibly there's so many questions that actually came in that we weren't able to answer. So we'll see if we can address those in future posts. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.